Hello, everyone. So today is one of those days where we have a featured guest here in the Inner Globe Charters group. And I couldn't think of a perfect person right now to interview now that we are moving on to almost post-pandemic, and so many have experienced so many different kinds of losses. And one of the most painful loss can be the loss of a loved one. And that can lead to one feeling profound grief, almost to the point of depression, if not depression, right? And what about if loss can be transformed as a doorway for love? Well, if you don't think that's possible, today's featured guest is going to change that for you. So, this is going to be a healing interview, a profound interview. So, let me bring on transformation coach Grace Kelly. Hello, Grace.
Hi, Aura. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Yes, we all can. Everyone,
Lovely.
let me present you to Grace. Grace, formerly a French teacher in London, Grace left her salary behind, moved to Italy, and started an international coaching business. She traveled the world hosting clients on retreat in glamorous locations from Rome to London to Beverly Hills and Saint-Tropez. Grace was faced with the most tragic loss of her life when she came home to find her fiancé dead in December 2020. Since then, she's been navigating loss, grief, and what's next? Offering the world a simple truth she discovered in Francesco's passing, that love never dies. Grace has been overcome with love, and she writes daily about how she's able to connect with Francesco and witness his guidance and signs. Everyone, be ready for such a healing, powerful interview slash talk. Grace, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Aura. It's lovely that you're having me on here. And I'm just going to take a moment to close my door because one of my dogs has decided to join me. So just 1 second, darling. I'll be right back.
No problem. Everyone, today's topic is going to be loss as a doorway for love. Learn how loss can expand your capacity to love. So, if any of you have been experiencing any kind of loss, especially the loss of a loved one, which can be quite painful, this is going to be the interview that, if you are open to it, it is going to transform how you view that loss so that your capacity to love can expand even more. So, Grace, I would like to ask you if you can please share with us a bit about your story and what led you to where you are now in your life.
Well, I suppose there's so many dimensions to the story, Aura. So it's a little bit around which story. I'm going to start with maybe the most recent. I'd been on this journey towards personal development and self-improvement and all of that type of thing for many years. And it really struck me that I wanted to help people. I wanted to offer people a greater peace of mind, a deep sense of purpose in their life. And so that led me to the world of coaching. And during that, I suppose, career transformation, you would call it, from school teacher to then becoming a coach, I learned so many things along the way. But one of the things that happened for me personally was I was introduced to really a new paradigm in psychology. And for those that are interested, that paradigm is, it's known as the three principles. And at the time when I was introduced to the three principles, I I was having a hard time in my relationship. It was very rocky. Francesco and I had been together about 7 or 8 years at that stage. And what I noticed in my introduction to the principles was that without me working on it, my relationship completely changed. I went from never being satisfied and feeling that I needed to change man, change location, change the price of my programs, change hotel rooms. I was infamously always needing the external to change to be okay. And something occurred for me on my journey where I got a deeper sense of the insecure mind at work. And it stopped looking like a good idea to me to blame my relationship for how I was feeling, to blame Italy, where I was based, for how I was feeling, to blame my bank account for how I was feeling. And as a result of that, my insecure mind got quieter, Aura, and life got easier, and my relationship with Francesco began to thrive. One of the first indicators for me that something had changed was I stopped taking everything so personally. And I no longer used leaving the relationship as a strategy to feel better. And so, boy, am I glad that I had that awakening, if you like, because little did I know that we only would have 5 years left together before Francesco would die. And those last remaining years of our relationship together were just so rich and so beautiful. And I can see now the innocence of our overthinking mind that gets in the way of the love that's always there. And I'm passionate now about helping people just really see where their experience is truly coming from. Because when you really know and you really get that the way you're made and how you're operating, your entire world is subject to change without having to make external changes. So that's that's a bit of my story, is just that I just love bringing that to people. And as I go through this grief, as I go through this tragic loss, I see that understanding supporting me even now, almost like a spiritual protection. As one of my mentors said, it's almost like a spiritual protection that has come in and is helping me, I believe, navigate such tragic loss.
I have to say, there is so much grounding in everything that you just shared. Everyone, seriously, I already can tell this is going to be an interview that's going to be a must to rewatch, because everything that she just said was so grounding. No, so now I want to ask you this. You said something that really caught my attention, which is the insecure mind at work. Can you expand a bit on that? Because I understand what you mean, but I want to make sure that everybody understands what you're saying, because I think that many times we are, as I like to say, asleep, and we don't realize that what's at work is the insecure mind.
Yeah, and I didn't either. I just lived in this experience of dissatisfaction. And I had everything going for me. I left my job. I'd become a coach. I had success in my coaching business within 6 months. I was traveling the world first class, staying in 5-star hotels. I was making a lot of income. Everything was happening on the outside in a very successful, wow way. And yet my experience inside was one of not enough, was one of dissatisfaction, was one of insecurity. And when we don't know that our thinking is the cause of our experience, it is innocent to begin to try and manage our circumstances, to try and get better circumstances, to try and have more money, more time. And the thing that really happened for me was, I was on this exploration. I didn't know this is what I was looking for. I thought I was doing some sort of improvement course for my business. And I had an insight, a sight from within. And that insight came with a feeling of love and compassion towards myself. I suddenly saw myself in a whole new light. I saw the innocence of my behavior based on the insecure thinking I'd been listening to. And or the only way I can describe it is it's like the volume just got turned down.
Wow. 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 Thank you for sharing that. That's very, very powerful. Now, I want to ask you this, and I hope you don't mind me asking this. What was going through your mind and within you when you learned about your partner's passing?
Yeah, well, I was right there. I mean, I came home from being out of town and I'd seen him 15 minutes earlier, and he'd gone out for a bike ride that morning as he normally would do. And I was on the main high street and he passed me. And I remember, and he, hi baby, you look beautiful. And I remember in that moment, I just remember feeling very rushed for time and very, I was back in my noisy head, I suppose. I was concerned about how I looked. And off he went, and he went home. And so by the time I got back to the house, to cut all the details out, I got into the house, and when I saw him, I knew he was dead. And I just remember, Aura, I was obviously in shock, but I also remember being swept over with love. A feeling of love that I perhaps have been trying to grasp my entire life suddenly was all there in a full body experience. And how death can lead us to experience that level of love is, to me, is a spiritual phenomenon. But what it has shown me is that that's all that's real. I went from living in my busy mind that was pushed for time and back in her insecurity a bit, where the volume had turned up a bit and life had gotten fast. And in an instant, in finding Francesco, that just dropped away, and I was just overcome with love despite shock. And again, I see that as a kind of a spiritual protection. I really don't feel afraid now of anything that happens to me again in life, because I feel now that love is the truth in any situation, in any horrible circumstance. That love is a spiritual protection that, to me, seemed to just emerge out of nowhere and carry me through the next 48 hours. And here we are, 3.5 months later, carrying me through all these weeks. And so I like to think that my shock and my grief has been cushioned with this higher level of love that is not unique to me, but rather is who we are at core when we drop out of that scary thinking. Now, I could use my thinking if I wanted to. In that moment, when I found Francesco, I could have used my thinking to scare the hell out of myself. But see, that just doesn't look like a good idea to me anymore. I know too much now about how the mind works, right? To use my thinking in a way that puts a gun to my head and scares me. And so as a result of that, I just felt love. I just felt love. And through the grieving process, I have experienced that love too. There are times when I have scared myself with my thinking. There are times when I have been in feelings of regret and fear. But see, when you know that the base of your experience is coming through thought, you stop using your thoughts to attack yourself. And I think that has helped me to have a level of grace through grief.
I can feel your beautiful soul from here. And everyone, seriously, I highly recommend that you rewatch this and really let Grace's words sink in. By the way, she has a lovely private Facebook group and what she calls Graceful Notes, which you are going to love, because if you love this interview, you're going to love everything she has to share. Now, I want to say this, Grace, because you said something in one of your recent videos that really caught my attention. And you've also mentioned it here, not in the same exact words, but you've mentioned it here. That is that after your partner's passing, you realize how true it is that love is all around us. And by the way, I love how you said that love is a spiritual protection. So for some with grief, it can be a challenge for them to see that love is all around us. So how can we get ourselves to realize this in the middle of so much pain and grief?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. See, when you don't see it, you don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be okay with that. The times that I don't see it are the times when my mind has just gotten really, really busy again. Now, that doesn't mean it's not there, but it's just to say that the more you can let your experience flow, feelings of sadness, feelings of grief, feelings of fear, feelings of regret, feelings of, wishing things were different. The more we can let that flow, the sooner we come back to our default setting, which is love and well-being. And I think what I hear people do is I hear them feel like the love is missing and the connection to their loved one is completely gone because they're innocently resisting, like holding tight, resisting the feelings they're in, all those feelings of sadness. And we're living in a world that, you know, really, it is the word, we have emotion phobia. We're living in a world where we're being told we should really only feel one particular way. And so when we get these other feelings that are all part of the process of life, when we get these other feelings of stress and anxiety and urgency and insecurity and sadness and fear, it's like we won't let them in, or we just come at them with more resistance, and that actually locks the experience in further. So I have been encouraging people that I work with and myself to let whatever emotions come just flow through. Because when you let them flow through, you know, that they move on and you come back to your default setting, which is love and well-being. A mentor of mine puts it this way, that every emotion, including those so-called negative ones, every emotion is love in disguise. And that rings true. Because when we're not fighting our emotion, fighting our experience, resisting how we're feeling, it's just another form of love getting us back to love.
Wow, that was powerful. That, what you said towards the end, is very powerful. Now, I want to ask you this. So it's very important to let the experience go through, because when we resist, it locks the experience in further. You mean that when we don't allow the grief, when we don't allow what it is that we're feeling at the moment, that what it is that we're feeling locks further in within ourselves?
That's my experience, that it kind of gets stuck. You know, we can have grief or fear or stress or anxiety without a second layer of suffering. And the second layer of suffering is fear. So when we're adding a second layer of suffering, which is, oh God, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Oh no, I'm afraid of my feelings. Oh my God, this feeling is scary. Then we've just added a second layer of suffering, and we can keep doing that. And to me, that kind of locks the feeling in instead of letting it flow. The teacher who you know, not discovered but uncovered the three principles. His name is Sydney Banks, and you can check out his work on sydneybanks.com. He's got wonderful lectures there to listen to. The greatest quote that he gave us, that I still feel rings so true, is, if the only thing people could learn was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. There is a freedom to not being afraid of your experience. There is a freedom to not adding extra layers of suffering. And if you look at little children, even little babies, you know, they have a whole range of feelings throughout the day. They have a whole range of emotions that they go in and out of, you know, all day long, but they don't get stuck on any one, because they're not judging the experience. Oh, I shouldn't be crying, you know. Oh, this screaming is bad for the neighbors, I better stop it. You know, they're not, it just flows. It just flows. So there's something around that I think is important for people to become less emotion phobia or phobic, and more accepting of the whole range of emotions, knowing that every emotion is love in disguise.
I love how you said that, and I have to agree that we have been all about being high vibe and all about being happy and all about, which is a great thing. We have to be high vibe, but sometimes I think that that can be confused with you cannot feel sadness, you cannot feel all these other emotions, which are normal emotions. So I love how you said that we've become so emotional phobia. We've developed this, and I have to agree with you. When we don't allow ourselves to experience these emotions, it does lock in even more in the body. Because I even notice it within myself. If I judge an emotion that I have, I feel it even more. So I love that you
Mhm.
pointed this out because it brings to awareness how important it is that we let the emotions flow through us. Now, you shared before that at one point you sometimes felt guilty at how good you were feeling because you didn't expect that in the face of such tragic loss that any of us can feel good. And the reason why this caught my attention is because I'm pretty sure others feel this way when so much is going on around us that they may feel that kind of guilt of feeling good. And I feel, I don't know if you would agree with me, that society even encourages us that when bad things happen, and I say in quotation marks bad because bad is however way any of us define it, that we shouldn't be feeling good. We should actually be feeling very, very bad. So my question is the following. Do you think that we can grieve and feel good at the same time? And if so, in what way?
Yes, I do. It's been my experience that throughout this grieving, um, this whole grieving process, there have been times of feeling very, very good. And in those times of feeling very, very good, those are the times I felt, interestingly, most connected to Francesco's new form, his non-physical presence. You know, there's not a formula. I think us humans like to kind of categorize things, right? Grief should look like this, and having a car crash, you should feel like this, and getting married, you should feel like that. It's not, if this is the correct word, it's not prescriptive. So on any given day, given the fact that our mind is running the show, if we are in a good state of mind, if our state of mind has risen because we've slept well, because we're using our thinking in a more helpful way, then regardless of what's going on around us or what has happened to us, we can feel good. Now, I notice when I haven't slept well, excuse me, when I haven't rested well, I notice I'm more prone to a state of mind that starts to worry. I notice that my consciousness kind of drops. And it's there that I meet my heaviest grief. It's there that I feel the deepest loss, the deepest sadness. But it's not that all the time. And it doesn't have to be that all the time. And a few people have kind of written to me very kindly to say, well, your suffering is just it just goes to show how much love you had. And that's a very nice thought. But I wonder if that's actually true. Like, I wonder if suffering and love actually have anything to do with each other. Because it looks to me now like suffering is optional. Suffering is not a badge of honor. Suffering is not a testament to love. but rather love is what's there all the time. And when I tune into that love, when I'm in that state of mind that is well rested and the elevator of consciousness has gone back up to the 100th floor, that's the feeling I'm in. It's just love. It's just love. My mind is no longer orientated to loss and regret and stress and worry and fear about the future. Is that making any sense at all?
Perfect sense. And I agree with you that suffering is not a badge of honor, that suffering is not a testament of love. I think that for so long we have equated suffering to, you must have loved him or her a lot. And I gotta agree that love and suffering, they don't have to be related. Now, just so everybody can be clear, I want to ask you this. When you say that you feel good, because I don't want people to think that feeling good means, oh yeah, I'm great. It's not that you're like, oh, but good in the sense that you're at peace with where you are and with what things have happened. Is that what you mean when you say that you feel good? Just for everybody to understand, because I think that it's time that we break away from thinking that loss has to equate with suffering. Doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. And this is applicable to any loss. This isn't, you could have lost your job, you could have lost your home, you could have lost money, whatever. I mean, this is not dependent on losing a loved one. This feeling good state, to me, you're right, Aura, it's not some ecstatic adrenaline rush that gets you high. To me, it's more a mind that is at peace and in the now. It's a feeling of well-being, rather than some big high. So that feeling, as I mentioned earlier, that's our default setting when we're not lost in thought, when we're not listening to the incessant chatter of the insecure mind that I talked about earlier. We just live in a feeling of well-being. We live in a feeling of feeling good. And you don't have to work at that to get that, you know. You don't your self-help becomes optional, because when you really get a little bit of quiet in there and you get an in the now state of mind, those feelings just rise back up. Those good feelings come back to the surface.
I love how you said you don't have to work on that. I think that sometimes we think that in order to feel good, we need to be doing something in order to feel that way. Not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it goes back to allowing everything to just flow, so that way you can get to that point where your consciousness elevator raises. By the way, I love how you said the elevator consciousness raises. I love that. Now I want to ask you this. How did you manage with so much loss all at once? Because I can only imagine it wasn't just the loss of Francesco, it was the loss of, I mean, he was your fiance, it's your dreams,
Mm-hmm.
the goals that you both had together. How do you manage with all that loss all at once?
Mm-hmm. I don't think about it. I mean, that might sound so simple or too easy, but it doesn't look like a good idea to me to think about all the abandoned dreams. When you really get that your mind is where your experience is coming from, you get a huge freedom in this lifetime, because you get to use your mind in a way that is helpful to you or unhelpful to you. And I've just learned from experience that using my mind in an unhelpful way isn't a good idea. And the way that we know we're using our mind in an unhelpful way is we get into despair. We get into anxiety. We get into stress and urgency and despondency. And people can live like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But you see, you kind of become intolerant to that way of living as you go up the elevator of consciousness, as you get more familiarized with feelings of well-being and feelings of feeling good and your true nature. That just looks like a bad idea. And so it's as simple as, I don't think about it. How do you manage such a huge loss? I don't think about it as a huge loss. I don't think about all the things that are never now going to happen.
I loved how you said that you don't think about what isn't going to happen, because indeed when we place ourselves mentally in that position where that's where we're placing our focus, as I like to say, what we put our focus on only magnifies. I love how you said that that's when we get to despair, anxiety, stress, because we're not using our minds in a healthy way. Now, I want to ask you this, because I know that you said in an interview that you have experienced miracles of love. So what are some of the miracles of love that you have experienced?
Oh, yeah. I love to talk about that. Well, I had no idea that I could still have access to Francesco. And what I did was I began recording. I was starting to get so many miracles of his love that I got myself a little book and I started recording in this little book all the miracles. One of the first things that happened was the night that we'd had the funeral. I woke up the next morning and I took his phone and I kind of realized, oh goodness, you know, Francesco was a software developer. So when it came to technology, everything was locked very carefully and everything was, it was all very organized, but also very highly inaccessible. And I remember thinking, oh, honey, I don't have any access to anything that I'm going to need access to. Your emails, your Facebook, your contact lists, your work assignments, any of it. And I woke up the morning after the funeral and his alarm went off on his phone at 7 a.m. And I took the phone to lift it and switch the alarm off, and it had an activation code or symbol, and I didn't know what it was. And my hand was gently guided to the correct activation. And we unlocked the phone together. And I had all access to everything I could possibly need, sort of urgently, for his work in particular. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I couldn't have known this. So that was the first indicator of love. And as the days went on, Aura, my yearning to feel close to him yielded more and more examples of his presence with me. I remember a few days later, it was a beach walk I was taking my dogs on, and I was praying to Francesco, you know, please show me that you're here. Please show me that you're okay, that you're with us. And it was about 7 o'clock in the morning and I was on the beach. And my dogs were pulling me to one other side of the beach. And I was reluctant to go, but in the end I gave in. I was just so tired. And as I walked over there, there was a 3-ring love heart with the day's date on it. And it said baci, which in Italian, as you know, means kisses. And I remember looking at that and thinking, who's been down the beach at 6 a.m. to draw these love hearts? Has somebody? And then it occurred to me, oh, he wants me to see this. He wants me to see this. Of course he wants me to see this. Another sign was his mother really was suffering a lot, like having no understanding of the potential of connection and having no understanding of, the role of the mind. And I was sharing with her some of the ways Francesco was communicating with me, including my dreams, including the beach, including the phone. And she said, well, do you think he might be able to communicate with me? And I said, well, why don't you ask him? It's all about the asking. And so she kind of said, yeah, okay, I'll ask. And a couple of days later, she came to me all excited and she said, Francesco's revealed himself to me. I said, well, in what way? What happened? She said, you see that little light over there? And it was a little light that she has with a tree on it. It's a tree of life. She said, it hasn't worked for a year and I've been meaning to change the batteries. And yesterday it lit up out of nowhere. It came back to life. Interestingly, I had a meditation on the same day where the tree of life presented itself to me in the meditation. I had no idea what it was. And so she gained some hopefulness and she's now been looking as well for signs. One of the big signs, if I may share, or is right here next to me. I was panicking because I didn't have a passport. I needed to renew my passport. And I said, and Francesco was so efficient in his human life. He was very efficient. He was a problem solver. He loved to fix things. And I always said, my babe fixes everything. I never had to worry because I knew he'll fix it. So I went online to renew my passport in Ireland, and there was this big notification, we're closed, Ireland's in lockdown, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks before your application can be processed. It could take up to 3 to 6 months to get your passport. And I'm thinking, oh my God, even if I could get on an airplane, I can't even get home because I don't have a passport and problem with COVID. So anyway, I grounded myself and I said, Francesco, you gotta speed this thing up for me. Get it to the front of the queue. Take care of the passport. I just have to know that I have it for when the moment comes that I can fly. So I thought, it'll take a few weeks. I got a phone call from my mother to say 48 hours later, the passport had been processed. And even she said, how did this happen? The whole country's waiting for passports. It's been in the newspapers about the delay on passport renewals and applications. And I knew it was Francesco. So instead of 6 to 8 weeks, instead of 3 to 6 months, I had my passport here ready to fly in the space of a few days. So these signs, Aura, so tangible, so loving. Sometimes the signs that come to me are just in a beautiful feeling of love. I will go to sleep at night and I'll have had a dream and I wake up, there's a little smile on my face. I feel he's been with me. And I'm just recording it all. I'm making a record. As you've seen I have a blog now where I've written every single grace note, as I call them, on the miracles of love and loss. And I have now no doubt, absolutely zero doubt in my mind, that love never dies, and that our loved ones are within reach. And part of our job is to get out of the way of thinking they're lost and they're gone and grieving that bit, and get into the connection with them, asking them that yearning for your connection with them. And again, who knew that was going to come out of this?
Wow. You already saw my face as you were sharing all these miracles of love. And I think you already answered the question that I was going to ask you, which was, how does Francesco's love still touch your life till this day? I mean, just sharing the miracles of love, I can already see how he's touching your life till this day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he taught me, if I may add, how his love touches me to this day. I spent a lot of my life self-improving to get to a feeling of well-being and joy. He just lived there. He lived with a fun, joyful, huge smile nature. And that love has changed me. To be with someone day in and day out who operates from a place of love and who operates from a place of joy and not so much seriousness, playfulness rather, it changes you. You know, it changed me. I was so easily caught up in my serious thinking, in my self-consciousness, in my insecurity. And he just lived light. He had a light heart, which is why it is a complete mystery to me that he would die from a heart attack. You know, he lived with a light heart. At 45 years of lighthearted fun is Francesco. And I can send you some photos. Maybe your audience will like to also see his face. And everyone has said to me, my God, just full of life and full of light and full of joy. And so his love in human form touched me so deeply. And now his love in this spiritual form is just, it's deepening me.
Wow. I want to ask you this. Did you have any preconceived ideas of how or what grief should look like? And if so, what are they? Or what were they, if you did?
You know, I didn't. Death had never really occurred to me. I kind of thought somewhere in the future I'd better prepare myself for my parents. I didn't have any. I guess what I will say is I couldn't have predicted that feeling good and having connection to my loved one was available in tragic loss and grief. My idea would have been just constant heartache. And that's simply not true.
Just amazing. It's amazing in the sense that, like I said, I feel the grounding in me speaking to you. And I'm pretty sure that everyone whether they're watching live or replay, they're going to be experiencing this same grounding that I'm experiencing at the moment, just listening to your experience and to your wisdom. I want to ask you this. During this time of grief, is there anything that you avoid in order to not add any layer on top of that grief?
That's a good question. I don't think there's anything I'm avoiding, because when you're not afraid of your experience, you don't need to control it. But what I would say is, I mean, I know that getting a good rest really does make a difference where grief is concerned. So I try to add a good rest. I like, if I need to fall asleep, like I did this afternoon before our interview, I just won't give myself a hard time about that.
I want to ask you this because it just came to mind. I think that when one is feeling either depressed or full of grief and anxious, that voice, that mind is so loud that it can actually not help them go to sleep. So, what would you recommend in order to turn down the mind so that they can be able to give themselves that proper rest that one needs, especially when we're full of pain and grief and anxiety and so on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I personally listen to the recordings of Sydney Banks that I mentioned earlier. You can, we can send a link to your audience, Aura. Listening, basically what I'm doing is I'm listening to truth. He speaks from a very deep, truthful place, and I find that it is a reminder of my true nature, and it also slows me down and keeps me in the voice of truth rather than the voice of insecurity. I've noticed that I've meditated for years. I've noticed that the meditation really does help, even if you have got a noisy mind, if you can follow a guided meditation or a guided visualization. I'm really enjoying adding that where I can. And again, just finally, just goes back to letting it flow. I think when we know our head is very, very noisy, what our instinct to do is try and turn it down or switch it off. No, again, just you can notice the noise, and that alone starts to turn the volume down. You can have compassion that you're in noise, and just being okay with your experience of being in the noise. The beautiful thing is that noise, it makes you really, 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 really tired. So if you can just let it make you really, 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 really tired, you'll fall asleep. You might need to have naps in the afternoon as well, like I do at times. There's a bit of a wisdom to it. It just gets so noisy that you end up getting switched off. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Now, I want to ask you this last question, just so that any emotion that anybody may be feeling, they can see it as love in disguise. So, if you can please elaborate on that, all feelings are love in disguise. In what way?
Well, I want to give reference to my mentor, Dickon Bettinger, who used that. That was his insight, and it really touched me. so he's probably the best person to elaborate on that. And then he's another wonderful person that if you're having a difficult time falling asleep, go check out Dick and Bettinger on YouTube and listen to his gorgeous videos too. So what I see about that from my side is simply that there's only love. There's only love. And we judge our emotions as wrong, bad, terrible, whatever, when in fact, it's just all love. You'll notice that when you get into feelings of sadness and criticism and judgment and whatever, at some point you get kind of fed up with feeling that way. And guess where you head back to? You head back to feeling love. That's why you don't have to worry about those. That's why those feelings are love in disguise, because everything, every feeling, every experience is pointing you back home to love and well-being.
I love that. Grace, for anyone that wants to follow you, that wants to learn more about you, I'm going to be putting all that information here right after this interview. But if you can please share with us, where can we follow you? Is there anything that you're offering at the moment that we should all know about?
Yeah, sure. Well, my Facebook group is the most active place. It's where you'll find me every day sharing those blogs and videos and all of that. So I'm glad people have the link to that, Aura. I'm also on Instagram at Graceful Coaching. And if there's something that speaks to you in what you've heard on today's interview, I work with clients professionally, and you can email me on gracefulcoaching@gmail.com if you'd like to explore setting up a time to have a session together, or you want more information on what's coming up. We've got a couple of lovely workshops coming up this spring that might interest your audience, Aura. So that's what I would suggest.
Grace, thank you so much for this very grounding and even healing too. Healing, talk, and interview. Thank you for all the wisdom. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for being vulnerable. Yes. So thank you so much. Anyone, if you have any questions, if you're watching this replay or you're watching it live, you could post it in the comments. You can tag Grace or you can tag me, and we're going to take a look at this. And everyone, follow Grace. I'm going to be putting all that information in this post. Grace, thank you so much. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. Ciao.
Bye. Ciao.
Bye.